Welcome to today's show. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to have you here. We've got a great conversation coming up for you. Before we get started, though, I ask two things real quick. Number one, if you feel like you've gotten value, you've gotten better, you have increased in your knowledge, you've learned something, anything of that nature, let your friends, your colleagues, your professionals around you know. You're at the next gig, tell them, hey guys, check out the GigReady podcast. Those guys are doing some cool stuff over there. I learned this, I learned that. I'd love to have you tell someone else about us. Secondly, if you've got something that you would love to hear about or share or know about or get better at, let me know. GigReady@gigrent.com. Shoot me an email. Say, hey, Jordan, here's what's going on. Here's what I've got for you. Here's a great idea. Here's something I'd like to hear about or someone I'd like to hear from. Or maybe you'd like to be on the show. You think, you know what? I would enjoy that. That'd be a great time. Let me know. Shoot me an email. It'd be awesome. I'd love to have you. Thanks so much for listening, because this is the Gig Ready Podcast. Jordan Goodfellow here with Gig Ready, and today we've got an awesome treat. We have Nick Rivera with Maptek. He's founder and CEO of a company that creates, manages, and also does on-site execution with content, video, creation, D3, servers, media servers, and the list goes on. We're going to have a little discussion today about media servers, workflow, how they use them, what they do, and what they're best used for. Really looking forward to it. And let's bring Nick in. Nick, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. As the world changes, of course, in this world that we live in right now, we're looking at a totally different world than it was 2 months ago from the standpoint of the virus and everybody stuck at home. However, from the standpoint of content and content creation, has it really changed a lot, or workflows roughly the same, ideas roughly the same, things like that?
Yeah, I think a bit of yes and a bit of no. Is the thing that I think has really happened is the speed of content production in just 6 weeks has already sped up. I mean, I've kind of laughed with some people. I've seen these memes that say things like, I've reached the end of Netflix, now what? Because people are quarantined, we're burning through content at this exponential rate. So the demand for content creation across the spectrum, everything from motion content to live action, I think is really exponentially increasing right now. So I think in that regard, it's a bit of the same in terms of the production pipeline, but I think that the timelines are expediting because people are looking for what to watch, what's out there, what's new, what's interesting. And especially because we can't go to live events, we're looking for a lot more diverse content, I would say. People don't just want to see a sitcom, they want to experience some of the live concerts that they can't go to anymore.
Yeah, makes sense. So that brings us to the question of types of content. Before we dive into workflows and everything else, let's do a quick explanation of XR, AR, VR, all of these two-letter acronyms that people use as they're referring to content. Can you break those things down real quick?
Yeah, so I think even backing up a step from that, the content world has gotten pretty fuzzy with all the acronyms and definitions. And fundamentally in content, you had originally 2D content, which is really, your just flat video, your kind of After Effects workflows. And then that moved into your 3D workflows, which were your Maya, your Cinema 4D, et cetera. And then now what's really happened is we moved into the world of real time. So rendering things live in video game engines in completely 3D spaces that look incredible. And then that bridged us into this more infinite world that you're saying of AR, XR, et cetera. So the first step really on the spectrum we look at is virtual reality. So completely digitally immersed in the video game, we'll call it. Visuals. You're completely encompassed by that, typically VR headsets or immersive visual spaces where you're completely encompassed by that environment. The middle ground is your augmented reality, and the simple explanation of that is the big craze, I guess, was the Pokemon Go app that really blended the virtual world with the physical world and combined those together.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the other end of the spectrum, we have extended reality or immersive mixed reality, as some call it, which I think is kind of a combination of virtual plus augmented to create an entirely encompassing world. So you're not as much just augmenting the world like Pokemon was, where you're adding virtual objects to the world, but you're actually creating an entirely immersive space that people can exist in.
Okay. And what about XR? Where does XR fall into that? Or is that just an alternate of AR or just a variation?
Yeah, I think the way we look at it is it's kind of all the same toolkit. Whether we want to go to augmented reality and do something, let's say, with an iPad or a phone
Okay.
versus doing something on a film set, the workflows from a content design perspective are roughly the same. We have to know 3D principles, 3D design. We have to know a lot about how to design scenes and spaces. And so the XR piece is really kind of just that, what we call, it's the immersiveness of doing building an entire environment and making that environment completely immersive and interactive in some way, shape, or form. That's kind of how we define it on
Got
that
it.
side.
Okay. Wow. So then let's talk about, I guess, starting from the beginning. You get a phone call. Someone says, "Hey, Nick, we want to create whatever, this world, this
Uh-huh.
experience, or we want to create an event where somebody's on stage, huge backdrop behind them, big widescreen." What's the first thing that you're talking about when they make that first phone call, from the beginning of this is what we want to do, all the way up until, all right, now we're going to get ready to go on site? What is that process like from beginning to execution?
Yeah, so when we start a project and when we look at our process, the overarching thing that we really look at in this pyramid working down is cohesiveness. In everything we really try to do as a studio, from creative to technical, is we want to do things that have a cohesive benefit to the show. And I think in a very simple manner, that is visual iconography. So having a piece of marketing material that matches a website, that matches the stage visuals, having that coherence across it, is we really try to look at the bigger picture, which is, what does this event look and feel like, and what is the messaging behind this event? And we really try to work those into everything we do, even if that's just simple motion visuals, projection, or things like augmented extended reality. Is we're really trying to look at the large picture of how does this actually tie in, and we want to look at how does this really benefit the brand, the customer, what they're saying, what they're doing, because we're trying to really amplify that.
Yeah.
And the more cohesiveness there is, people have a better chance of remembering what was happening, visually identifying. If the message is repeated, they're going to remember things. So we really try to look at it from that lens of, if we bring technology into this picture, how is it going to amplify that top piece, which is that message cohesiveness. So I
Got it.
think that's really the first thing we're always looking at before we even get into sketches or concepts or anything really like that.
Okay. So then, cool. So we establish how is this going to fit the message? How are we best going to take the message, make it bigger, make it fit the
Mm-hmm.
idea and the concept of what they're looking to
Yeah.
go for? Do you guys get heavily involved in what the physical items, the physical set pieces, and all that stuff look like, or are you normally handed that and then they say, here's everything we want to put it on, figure it out?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. We have a lot of great relationships with designers on some ends of the spectrum, and then there's other events where we're actually the designers. So it really varies, but Yeah, in the case of some, we really try to work as closely as we can in those partnerships to say, hey, we have this interesting new piece of technology. How can we work with the designer to say, let's integrate that to create this ideal or this piece? Because we really feel when the show is working very cohesively, when you have your show designer, lighting, audio, video, on down, everybody working together, you're going to get a more cohesive experience as a whole.
Yeah.
So the more we can all figure out how to make those things tie together, um, that's a really big piece of the spectrum. And if I can actually show you on that,
Of course.
um, some
Let's take a
slides
look.
here. This was actually one project that we did a couple of years ago. It's an event in Atlanta called LeaderCast. And this was the initial branding that we started with. And working with the show designer, a good friend who lives here named Paul Green, he started sketching this set. And the idea was that the set was actually going to be a giant set piece that was projection mapped. And there were some different kind of iterations through time of what that looked like. And what ended up becoming is it actually transitioned into a giant LED screen. And the thing about a giant LED screen is when you turn it off, it's just black. When you are doing a physical set and you turn it off, there's still a set.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is we worked really closely with him, with the show, to basically say, okay, if the set is LED and we have this brand, this marketing brand that has these kind of shards of glass, what we actually did was kind of combine the two concepts together, took their marketing, took this LED set, and what we did is we were actually able to do this, which is incorporate uh, the content to actually become the set. So you can see here really simply is we iterated these shards of glass into the LED screen that became the set.
Yeah.
And we built these in a really interesting way that they actually served as like the animations you'll see here. So the speaker bumpers would actually play across this LED screen, and then they would actually animate to become the entire set. So we kind of worked with him on this idea, his first idea of a projection map set. And we said, well, if this goes to LED, we could do that in a really interesting way in content to get a pretty similar effect like this. And I mean, even some interesting little details we thought out is you see those two IMAG screens on left and right. Those are not extruded. Those are actually just part of a flat LED screen. And we actually just gave that depth to actually make it look and feel that way. So when you actually
Wow.
see the pre-visualization here, you can see it's just a big LED screen, just
Yeah.
big flat LED screen. So that kind of goes back to that point of that cohesiveness of working together is by working with Paul, working with the show, we were basically able to put these pieces together and to build something in a very different way. And also a really interesting note about this workflow that was really fun is color is a very particular thing to this client because it's a broadcast event. So in the design process, we iterate a lot of different colors. But the thing is, when we get on site, we actually want to fine tune those colors. So what we actually did in this event is utilizing Disguise servers, media servers, and Notch real-time content creation. This content is actually rendering entirely live in show. And what that means is that we could actually tweak all the colors on site. So we worked with the lighting designer, with Paul, and we actually could look at the set through the lens of a camera, look at truck engineering scopes, and we could actually fine tune the shade of green, the shade of red to look just right on camera because everything was rendering live. So that's kind of a fun side thing about that cohesiveness is when you're all working together, when you're working with the lighting designer, with the show designer, with camera
Yeah.
engineering, all the way down the chain, you can really build something that is visually engaging, visually interesting, pushing the envelope, kind of, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it looks outstanding. I would have never known, looking at the photo from the front here, that that those LED screens were not somehow
Yeah.
slightly depth not like I wouldn't have known that that was all flat. That's
Yeah.
outstanding. That's super cool. Does that change? Does that change much of the workflow from when you guys start creating content? So you have a design, you have a set, you know what it's going to look like, and now day one, okay, we're starting to create content. You build in the whole plan. What does that look like how do you set up a content creation workflow, I guess? Because that's honestly something I really don't know about, is like that, what that looks like.
Yeah. So setting up a content creation workflow, um, for us, I should say every project is very unique. So first of all, we don't do really any projects that fit inside of a 1920 by 1080 frame. A lot of our specialty is large format, large scale visuals. So doing things that are well above 4K. And when I say well above, we had a project right before this that was it was in the ballpark of 12K by 8K. So very
Wow.
large content resolutions that we're dealing with. And what that pipeline looks like is, to give you an example, is a little bit like this. This is a project we did year ago here in Atlanta. It's a large party outside of the Super Bowl, put on by DirecTV and produced by some good friends of ours in Vancouver named De Facto. And this is an interesting one, is when we projection map these two giant cubes, we kind of have to think about a lot of things at the exact same time. So we have to first start thinking about the technical, which is how do you actually project onto these cubes? And why that matters is because what we actually have to determine at the first initial stage is technically how do we do it, but we also have to determine our pixel map, which the pixel map is our golden rule to how we physically create the content. So in the case of these two giant 80-foot cubes, we had to very quickly figure out the technical of how you project on it, because that dictated the pixel map to how we created the content. So as you see here, you can see the left and the right cube are these unfolded kind of origami pieces, which was the workflow we came up with, is to take these unfolds and then basically fold them back onto the cube. So we have to think about that, but simultaneously with that technical side, we have a parallel track running, which is the creative side, to determine what should these things look like, what should the content be, what is possible.
Huh.
So on our creative half of the company, is everybody's thinking about what is the client trying to communicate? Are there any preconceived notions of things that the client is looking for? So we evaluate, do you have a current marketing or branding scheme that you're working with? Because if they're trying to convey a new product, a new offering, a new service, there's usually a lot of very specific branding, especially with clients such as AT&T, DirecTV, Pepsi. They have very specific things that they need to communicate, which is a certain logo, certain fonts, certain colors.
Yeah.
We have to understand those very quickly. And then we have to understand the style. So what's the look and feel that they want to go to? And sometimes the client is very open-ended about that look and feel. Other times they're very specific because they have they have a lot of brand specifics about what they need to communicate, like I was saying.
Yeah.
So in the case of what you're seeing here with these cubes, we've had a great relationship working with AT&T's New York creative team, because they really understand a little bit of the technical, which is projecting on an 80-foot tall cube. And then they also understand a bit of the creative side. So we kind of work hand in hand to say, hey, this works well, this is not going to work well, and we can kind of have some give and play in that to come up with something that's going to look interesting on this. I mean, kind of speeding up to this year in Miami, this is some of the visuals we did for them just back this January. So they, in this case, had their guidelines where they wanted this neon looking piece. They wanted these kind of neon bright colored lines, and they really wanted to talk about their 5G offerings. So we basically had a bit of freedom within that to play with what the actual designs looked like and came to be, and realizing those as we move forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. So, what are you guys doing? Sometimes flexibility, sometimes very rigid, stay in your lane. These are the rules you have to abide by type stuff. What are you doing
Yeah.
to stay organized within that? How do you guys stay and keep everything on track, on schedule? What are you guys doing in those regards?
uh, to stay on track, what are we doing? We have an incredible producer. Having, I laugh, but for real, having Maria on our team is huge, because she's really that side of things, conveying between the clients and the team,
Yeah.
in that back and forth communication of timelines. Internally, we have a bit of process of the usual project management, etc. But what we really try to do at the beginning of a project, and what Maria does, is conveying to the clients, okay, let's understand what you want to do. And then we turn that around and understand what are the next steps in that process that we need to work on. And then we set fairly rigid timelines. So with this project, with Miami, working with these clients, with the Zone, AT&T, and Pepsi, we would set very rigid timelines of, we need these assets from you, logos, fonts, colors, by X date. Then we'll turn this around on this date. We'll give you revisions on this date, and we kind of go down that process. So we try to really set out a pretty strict schedule of timelines, of things, of client communication, etc. And then on the internal side, we're using just a lot of different tools, obviously from your basics of Slack to our project management platform is called ClickUp. So it's basically a giant task management program. And Maria has actually done a lot of automation. So that's a big kind of internal techie point, is automating the workflows. And so from a high level, we use application platform called Airtable, and that manages all of our projects. Then we distill that into ClickUp, and then we have connections to Google Drive, et cetera, and all of these actions are automated. So that really helps the conciseness of some of our internal workflows, is being able to automate things and make it a little more efficient.
So like you enter it into Airtable, and then if it's something that needs to be disseminated down into to ClickUp, that will then automatically translate
Exactly.
over to whoever's responsibility that is, which then pops
Yep.
up for them and says, "Hey Nick, today you're supposed to render out 4 pieces of content to make sure that we stay on track for date X
Exactly.
and whatever." Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
Very cool. So we get through the whole process, all the content's created, clients looked at it, they've seen it, we're ready to move on site, we're ready to pack the gear up, let's go to Miami, let's go wherever. What are the things that you guys are packing up in the office to get ready for your team to go to the show site to then execute?
A lot of things. So every project is very different and unique for us, but the core things we are usually always bringing on shows are tons of computers. So we have a whole arsenal of different computers for doing code work, to pre-visualization, to interactive visuals. And we have, like I said, an arsenal of different machines for different purposes. So we're usually packing Pelicans full of computers. Um, a lot of kind of the back end, we have a lot of kind of gizmos and things like that we bring on projects. We as a team don't have the production side, so we don't own LED projectors, but we have a lot of the back end, from our
Yeah.
disguise servers to computers to different things like that. So usually it's Pelicans and racks of computers, equipment, different things like that, um, to more miscellaneous stuff.
Do you bring any of your like render servers and things like that with you, or because of Notch and things like that you don't need that anymore, you can just D3 Notch and content is boom created in real time?
Yeah, we still have we have machines that meet certain specs for us. And so we bring those machines as kind of our benchmarks, I would say. When you get into the world of real-time content creation, you really have to know that the machine you're creating on is equal to the machine you're playing back on. So what we try to do in the disguise world of media servers is we try to create something that is on an equivalent machine to a GX2 or GX2C. So all of our internal spec machines basically have to match that spec. And we
Okay.
do some more internal testing to know when we load this real-time code onto this server, it's going to have roughly the same performance. So that's kind of our golden rule, and we've built machines that meet those specs for us, and we are continually upgrading those machines to stay on top of
Huh.
whatever the current needs processing are.
Now, you just said something that maybe I was unaware of. Help me understand a little bit better. Real time content creation. How does that actually work? You mentioned two computers, and that's something I had no idea about. Are there,
Yeah.
in that workflow, are you creating content in real time, like someone's sitting at a computer doing whatever they're doing on that screen, creating it, and then it pipes over and goes through Notch? Help me understand that. I'm actually genuinely interested to better understand how that works.
Yeah. So with the real-time content workflow, it's still a bit like a traditional workflow. Is you have somebody who has to create the content,
Okay.
and then you have something that has to play the content. So that paradigm still exists. Is we are still designing content, and then we are still handing that content off to a playback engine. And on the content side, our tool of choice for years has really been working in Notch. And Notch, the way it works is you can export kind of one of three different ways from Notch. You can export a rendered video, a movie file, just as we all know, and we can hand that movie file to any platform that can play a video
Mm-hmm.
file. The second thing we can do is export what we call standalone executable, so an application. And we use that a lot of times for interactive installations or temporary installations. We can run a high powered PC, and then we basically run an application that is running Notch. The third thing is exporting a block. And a block is basically a code container that gets loaded onto a media server platform that supports it. And that list of media servers is long. The big ones are Disguise, Green Hippo has support, 7sense, VYV, down the list of all these media servers, where you can basically take that block of code and the media server understands it just like a video file. You just copy it over and it loads into a timeline, and it loads right next to your timeline like a video file. So from that standpoint, we're still doing the same thing. Is we have a content creator who's creating in the editor,
Mm-hmm.
basically, but instead of exporting a video file, they're exporting code now. And then that code gets loaded into the media server, and the media server treats it basically like a video file. So that pipeline is still from a content creator to a media server technician. The pipeline is still very much the same. I create and I still give you a file.
Got it. And I assume then you're networking all this stuff together when you say it gets loaded onto another computer. You're not, doing the
Yep.
sneaker net with the USB drive, handing it across to
No,
load stuff up.
no, definitely. And that's where this event in Miami, this Super Bowl event that we've done for years, it's really the epitome of real-time workflows. Is we have this giant building that's some 80,000 square feet. Um, and we have this show had 7 disguise servers running on it. And
Wow.
we have surfaces everywhere. And kind of showing some of that in the visualization is there's a giant screen on stage, screens on the ceiling, TVs everywhere. You saw this exterior 200-foot wide exterior projection mapping. Even there's light bars that are running all the way wrapping around the building. Those were actually all controlled via media server.
Huh.
And really the pinnacle of it is right as you walked into the atrium, we had this very, very complex three-dimensional structure that we called the bird. And the bird was basically this giant canopied structure that was projection mapped. And it basically served as this canopy that people could stand under. And actually at the bottom of the frame, you can actually see there's a DJ that's under it. And throughout the night, there were all sorts of different visuals that played on this thing. This thing is actually 3 stories tall. It's kind of hard to tell in all of
That's
these
huge.
pictures,
Yeah.
just how big the structure really is. But with this whole workflow, what's phenomenal in this new era of content creation is a lot of things. Is on site, we actually have a content team out back in a trailer, and they're actually networked live into the show servers. So what that means from a content standpoint is we can create a file and then push that file directly to the servers 100 yards away in the building when we're not in the building.
Yeah.
The second thing about real-time content creation that's pretty incredible is the file sizes are infinitesimally small compared to traditional content. So we're not actually pushing hundreds of gigabytes of rendered files. We're actually pushing just megabytes. And I think it's kind of funny to say that the entire content package for Pepsi on this one night, I think was about 750 megabytes. So the entire building content package is just a tiny little file compared to traditionally, if we had to render all these assets, I mean, we could easily be talking well over a terabyte. You know, some of these resolutions are just huge. The exterior of the building is, I think it was like 6K wide. That bird structure is about 8K wide. So some very large resolutions, but not only is that incredible, the real pinnacle thing I would say is what we can actually do is plug in over network into the servers, and we can actually make we'll call it live changes. We can make live edits ahead of time. So 2 days before the event, we actually stood outside of the building with Pepsi looking at these visuals, and our designers can actually log into the server to the content that's running and actually make changes and edits while the client is approving it. We don't do that in show. Once we're in show, we lock everything down.
Yeah.
But for the purpose of editing things, it's a very seamless workflow. So all that to say, we can network everything together, everything can talk, and we're moving such small files around. Updates take no time at all to push an update and then have it right there ready to go.
Got it. So you can create a block, for instance, and then instead of having to run what a lot of people do, which is I need a 10 gigabyte network, you can run a standard, gigabit network, and everything is still lightning fast. In fact, faster than if you're transferring content. And so, I mean, we're talking tens and hundreds of hours of render time saved by utilizing a real-time render engine like Notch that just takes the block, plays it, and then, very cool. Wow. All right. I better understand that. That's fantastic. Wow. And I mean, it's just, it creates great pictures. It creates great graphics. That's fantastic. So what are the top 3 things that you travel with, that you take to show site when you're going to show site?
Yeah, so my punch list here is kind of 3 things. One, a test monitor. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but as a video guy, any quick way to plug into an SDI HDMI signal and check it. My test monitor, which is many years old, is a small HD AC7. I don't even think they make the AC7s anymore, but it's just basically a small test monitor. It runs on Canon SLR batteries. That's an indispensable thing to have to be able to just say, hey, this is or isn't working. The second thing is the Whirlwind Q box. That thing has saved my butt so many times to basically check audio signals. For those who aren't familiar, it's a little tester that lets you plug in 1/4-inch XLR you can hear a signal, you can send tone. A really big use in our world is understanding time code. So when we need to time code things together, I can just plug in, I can hear that I can hear that noise is coming down the
Yeah.
line, etc. I can plug in our media servers, hear that audio is coming out of it. That's been indispensable for many years. And then the third thing I think that all of us carry these days is decimators. Now, more specifically, we only own decimator crosses over the MDHXs. And the big reason why I do that is the decimator cross has a test grid generator in it. And that test generator comes in handy so many times. And to give you an example, on this Miami Super Bowl event, we had going into the router a decimator cross just generating grids. And so it just generated a test bars. And that way we could really easily just go into our Blackmagic router and say, route that grid to a projector. And now we instantly know that that line is working. So that's been really great for us to have.
Yeah.
Like I said, that test grid functionality comes in a lot of handy.
Got it. Awesome. So let's get a little more personal real quick. What are two things that you yourself can't do without on show site? Any show, doesn't matter when or where. Like, what are the two things that Nick has to have when he's there? And it doesn't have to be technical. It doesn't have to be technical.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you two things. One is I definitely think having the decimator, I've always just taken one in my backpack, with me. Over and over, just throwing one in there. It's really easy. The other side I would say is the software side is really fascinating to me. I get really fascinated in making technology talk to each other. So being able to have cross integration and seamlessness of, we've done many times where Barco E2 system is being controlled by a Disguise media server, or we've had Disguise controlling ROS expression systems in arenas before. So that kind of stuff is very fascinating to me, to have those systems talking back and forth and whatnot.
Very cool.
And I think there's a bunch of ways you can do that, but I think that the main two things I use is, I think everybody these days uses BitFocus Companion and the Stream Deck platform. Yeah. That's just huge. The BitFocus software is incredible and can be used without even a Stream Deck. And so that's really big for me. It's a great piece of software that just allows you to make pieces of gear talk. You can control a Blackmagic router, the Disguise server, an E2, a Spider, all at the same time. And I think that's really awesome.
Very cool. All right. Awesome. So, shows executed. I mean, your content and your stuff speaks for itself. That's for sure. Let's talk about real quick. I know that you had some different software things that you guys use, that you utilize on most, if not every show. What are those specifically that you guys have that you find work best for your workflows?
Yeah. So my list, which includes Companion, is another app. I'll show you a little bit, Node-RED, and another fun little app called Vizier. The first is Node-RED is a fun platform. It's open source. And the reason I really like it is because it's super lightweight and it actually runs super well on $35 Raspberry Pi computers. To give you an example, I have one running in my closet right now on a Raspberry Pi 2. And Node-RED is a node-based platform. It runs entirely in a web browser, and it allows you to connect all sorts of fun stuff together. If you actually go to the Node-RED website, I've actually open sourced an entire platform, a whole set of nodes that allow you to control Disguise media servers. So you can literally just go in there, grab the code, and control Disguise. I already mentioned Companion. The Stream Deck is something that goes with us to every show these days. Multiple Stream Decks, really great way, obviously, to control stuff, trigger stuff, etc. A fun little app is this little guy is, I never pronounce it right, but Bezier, like the Bezier curves and things. Um, so this app, first of all, it's Mac only, but we've run it, on a MacBook in conjunction with media servers and things. But what it does is it basically gives you timelines and layers, but all of those timelines are data driven. So the timelines can be DMX, ArtNet, different protocols such as OSC, MIDI, and you can even put audio files in. So you can put an audio track in, play that out, and then you can actually put in keyframes and different triggers to happen in time. And everything's controllable, and the software is super affordable. It's under $100. You get 2 licenses. And to give you an example, I mean, we've used this years ago. We did this art installation using kinetic lights. This was all controlled from that app. So basically, we could go into the app and actually you can see me keyframing things as we can keyframe all these different motors, the lights, all the different things really simply. We've also used it on various different events where we can play timecode wave files, DMX commands, OSC commands. Super cool, super fun little app. And it goes back to the whole thing I was telling you is I like to make technology talk. So that's an app we bring with us, companion. We always have on pretty much all of our machines. And then Node-RED, we actually have little Raspberry Pis that we've built in a metal case that have fans, and they actually run on PoE, which is really great. So we can just put them in a rack and we can run the Node-RED software on them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you just, Ethernet, boom, right in, PoE,
Yeah.
powers up, fires up, and bink, and everything just connects once
Yeah.
it's set up properly. Very
Yeah.
cool. If somebody wants to get into the world of content, media server creation, operation, where's a good place to start?
Good question. I mean, my kind of journey is my background was actually in sports television, and I stumbled into the live events world. I thought I was going to be a video editor. And about 2 days out of college, I started touring and went on the road for about 10 years. And in terms of learning things, I pretty much I try to take everything in from every perspective. Two of my best friends right out of college were a step carpenter and a lighting designer. So I basically would jump in anywhere I could and help. At the time, I'd help repair movers, and then we'd go build set pieces, and then I'd go engineer video racks. So we really kind of all learned from each other. And that's kind of the one fundamental thing I would say is always trying to learn from others in different industries, because you always learn something that completely different that can be applied. I think right now in particular with the virus, what's really interesting is there's just a wealth of online tutorials and information available that product manufacturers are putting out there, from the media server world to lighting consoles to all sorts of software, video switching systems. So many people are just putting out everything in a lot for free. And I think just searching around, that's a huge thing. Is if you find, for instance, like media server world, Disguise, Green Hippo are putting out tons of tutorials. Even in the content creation world, there's all sorts of tutorials going out for Unreal, Unity, Notch right now. I just recommend to everyone doing some searching, because there's just a wealth of information. And then the third is, I would say, is the social aspect. Is all these products, all these manufacturers have Facebook groups around them. A lot of the Facebook groups are really active these days. So jump in and do not be afraid to ask the stupid questions. Just ask people, how do you do this? What's this? Et cetera, and just never stop learning.
Very cool. So along with that, as we wrap up here, what are two things from your perspective that, somebody just finished a gig last week. They did an event. Maybe it went really well. Maybe it didn't. Ultimately, doesn't matter. What can they do going forward? What is a mindset or something like that you would say, these are two things that you could focus on so that your next gig is even better than your last one. I want to be more gig ready the next time I go and I set foot in a gig. Maybe it's next week. Maybe it's 3 months from now. We don't know what that looks like. Yeah. But what, from your perspective, are some things that would fit that definition?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things I tell my team is every day you're in the industry, you're in business, you always need to be learning something. And the thing about that is sometimes you learn some really good things and sometimes you learn some pretty crappy things. And sometimes you learn a new way to do something. You learn a new shortcut. You learn something more about hardware. You learn a new feature you never knew. Sometimes you learn the hard way of you messed up a cue in show. You misfired something. You didn't program something right. But the thing I tell the team is balance that out. And what you need to learn is what can I improve moving forward? What can I learn from those moments that make me more prepared and better for the next time? And I'm always evaluating that consciously. The second thing I say a lot is this kind of quote, which is, especially as a technician on a show, I joke that 10% of your job is doing it correctly, and the other 90% of your job is what you do when it doesn't work correctly. And so I think always understanding and thinking through that 90% of, if this were to go off the rails, what do I do? If this thing isn't going to work, what am I going to do? And really thinking through that sort of backup plan. And sometimes those backup plans, as we know, in certain shows have to be more ironclad than others. But it's really just about learning how to troubleshoot, how to problem solve, how to think through signal chains, how to understand, if this isn't working, where I need to look through every piece of the puzzle to understand why is it not working. It's really that process of knowing. And I really think, I said it is, especially in a technical capacity, that's really, really valuable, is that 90%, that problem solving and that understanding.
Awesome. Love that, man. Well, hey, thanks for coming along and taking 45 minutes and talking about some of this stuff. I personally learned a ton of stuff that I didn't know at all, which is great.
Awesome.
If people have questions, they want to reach you or talk to you or ask more questions to you, what's the best way to reach you and get a hold of you? Email or whatever. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so definitely check out our website, maptek.com. You can see all of our work, keep up. Also our Instagram at Maptek. You can check that out. And, just Instagram, I'm on there. So you can reach me personally. It's at my full name, Nicholas Rivera. But you can find me through Maptek and whatnot. And definitely, last little thing to add is definitely check out a lot of our latest ventures, what we're doing in the virtual space at maptek.com/virtual.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Lots of great stuff. My apologies. I completely forgot that we had this at the end. So that's on me.
All good.
But yeah, virtual experiences, these guys are just killing it when it comes to looking at real-time rendering and notch and everything that you can put into an experience that might be in one room but can take you anywhere in the known universe. And you can do so many cool things with it. I definitely recommend checking it out because it looks outstanding. Nick, you guys are just making great content. I love to see all you guys do, and excited for what the future holds, even though we might be on pause at the moment. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time with the new baby and, business and R&D and everything else, man. It's fantastic. I'm glad you guys are hanging in there and doing quite well.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening today. It's been a great episode, and I hope you learned something. If you did, go out and tell somebody. Let them know that they can be a better professional too. The best thing that you can do for those around you is help them become better at what we do and how we do it. As professionals, there is nothing more that we want to see than an amazing event, and events don't happen without you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part. Let us know how we can do better, and we'll see you next time.